Hey guys, Kasal here. You're about to watch Thorin talk and talk and talk. But it's kind of good, I swear.
Now, Team Liquid's new lineup has been announced from the earlier part of this month. Like you will have seen, obviously, they were sort of a bit cheeky, like day by day they released the name, even though these are the exact names that were rumoured, like, I mean, over a month before that, what, 2 months before or something? It is a very exciting collection of names, but I heard behind the scenes this was going to be the lineup. Even though they did start with Zeus and a giant board of all these names, this is the lineup they were going for quite early on, and they basically had the right agreements from these players that they would join, even if at the time there was still some rumours of other orgs getting those players, or like, oh, imagine if this guy went in, other drama surrounding them in other orgs, or even the notion maybe some of them wouldn't leave teams, even though, as far as I know, Twist was always going to leave this FaZe Clan team, and that was the case before they did the whole run in CS2. So, first and foremost, I always do in these videos the notion that you talk about who you're getting rid of before about who you get. Now, it's true, sometimes there'll be scenarios where who you're getting rid of is really good, but who you're getting is even better. Like an obvious example would be like Nork in an IP. Yeah, look, Nork wasn't the best AWP in the world, but he was pretty good. And if you're going to be like a mainly Swedish lineup, you should probably keep him. But then again, if Device is available, of course, I'm going to take Device instantly. It's not really about Nork anymore. Now, there are a few players in this lineup that I do think that applied to, because it's more that I know you can get these world-class talents. That means you have to do the move. Like, for example, like YEKINDAR obviously didn't get kicked out of the team. He just got the in-game leader spot taken for him. Like, I predicted myself that wouldn't work out. I said on all my shows, thought it was a terrible move. He doesn't have the temperament for it. Quite frankly, I think there's a lot of hubris and arrogance in even thinking he could be like the best in-game leader in the world or whatever. Like, no, what happened is you sat next to one of them. He's called Jame, and he called a very different game to YEKINDAR's understanding of CS, as far as I can tell. And I never saw it from YEKINDAR. His teams didn't look like they had some great read on how to play the game, how to call, and it just tanked his own individual game. It meant that sometimes he'd have the odd good game, but then he wasn't doing a great job as an IGL. And then sometimes he couldn't have those massive impact performances, and he obviously gave his spot away to Patsy, didn't he? Which is why I actually don't think, despite, in fact, this guy did get some criticism, everyone did in this Liquid squad, I actually think Patsy's kind of been hard done by. I actually think, look, it's an international squad. He's used to playing with, like, people who speak Russian. He's coming to a very different style of team. They're figuring out they've got a brand new IGL, who himself isn't traditional IGL. The coach has been himself in and out of the lineup and has only come back to the, like, I actually think Patsy was kind of in a tough spot there. I think he's a decent enough player. I think he does have potential and talent. I could see him through a Russian or ex-CIS team having success in Counter-Strike. I just think the problem is, essentially, he is doing YEKINDAR's role, and YEKINDAR is better at it. So if YEKINDAR swapping back, yeah, it makes perfect sense you remove Patsy, especially in light of some of the names you kept. Like, look, I think there's a world where you could have had YEKINDAR and Patsy, but then again, people are, this is where what's funny is I'm not someone who thinks there's only one set role, but other people talk like there is, that you can't ever make two workers work in a team. You can. Question is, do they have the will for it? Do they want to make it work? And what spots do they like to lurk on the maps? Not everyone lurks the same way, right? So I get why you replaced the Patsy. But just for me, if we're saying Skulls is the replacement for Patsy, then couldn't we have just kept going with Patsy? But whatever, okay. I could also see that if the team wasn't working, maybe he doesn't want to live in America or work with an American team. I know it's an EU team, but you're going to have to do more travel than if you were in a team from Russia, etc., even though you get paid a lot more money. The whole Rainwaker as a supportive element, look, a lot of that was just me trusting Daps. I actually think that guy wasn't terrible, by the way. Look, he wasn't a highly skilled player, but I thought some of the stuff he did was all right. I thought that wasn't the main failing point in that team, I think he just took the blame and tanked the aggro, as it were, because people looked at his name. He had a silly name. People kept saying he was Rainwalker or whatever, like, and people just never vibed with this guy, and so he got the blame. OC is an AWP. I told people the whole time it was inappropriate he was ever in this team, in my opinion. He was never good enough. He wasn't played around, so it was a waste of time. If they had have played around him, that would have been a waste of time. He just never made it, and he never had the performance. Like, essentially, he's just, what, a slightly better version of Halzerk. That's about it, right? So if this guy's going to be a great player, he's going to have to do it in a different team, probably an NA-only team, and he's going to have to do it as the star. So we'll see if he ever does. I think Daps absolutely could have stayed as coach, in my opinion. A great coach, guy with a great mind for the game, but whatever. He's obviously moved on. He's a player now for NRG, and he's building up a squad with people he likes over there. Obviously, the Liquid guys weren't really his guys anyway, except Naf, really. Like, I sort of get it. I still think you could have stood with Daps. Basically, for me, you could absolutely have kept, I don't know about Rainwaker, I think you could have kept YEKINDAR, Patsy, Daps. I would probably have let Rainwaker and OC go, but you let them all go. Basically, you just roll swapped YEKINDAR back to being an aggressive rifler, and then you kept Naf. That's it. Naf's the only player who stays in his original role. Now, by the way, there were rumours of other players. Like, I'll give you one right now that you won't have heard on any shows. No one's dropped this before. I'll tell you one, which is when I saw this lineup beginning to be put together with cadiaN, my first thought was, wait a minute, you essentially could just sort of make an amazing remix of Liquid 2019. Like, isn't cadiaN essentially a better in-game leader on the raw sense? Debatable, but I think so. And he's certainly a better AWPer and a better, like, actual fragger. So, actually, if you made that lineup, look, I get Stewie's probably not fucking coming back at this point in time, apparently you just still want to play. But if you just put, like, YEKINDAR instead of Stewie, and you get Elige and Twists back with Naf, and then you have cadiaN, wouldn't that be an unbelievable lineup that could, like, win everything? Well, you know what? Here's what's juicy. I've heard Elige was a name that was potentially discussed or on those boards, but he got vetoed. Someone didn't want him in the team, so just leave that little juicy little nugget out there for you. Now, the obvious gamble here is Skulls, right? This is the obvious name that, like, doesn't really belong among the others, hasn't done the things the others have, hasn't shown the individual potential the others have, but I actually think of the gambles, if you look at all the rest, as much as they all have a gamble element and uncertainty, the others are more sure things, and I think it actually allows you to make this gamble by shoring up or hedging, as it were, with what your other gambles are and how likely they are to pay off. So if we go through the lineup, we'll start with Naf, the guy who's just staying, presumably he's going to stay in his roles, right? What's great about this move is that by putting together this squad, you've actually potentially, not just because it's like an NA squad again, but you have actually potentially saved North American Counter-Strike, and here's why. Because already the North America winning the most was Twists, but he's off in a EU clan phase. And quite frankly, if you listen to interviews of Naf over the last few years, it's implied, he also had a German girlfriend, that he's been thinking about doing the same move. Like, I could have seen a world where it's him instead of a Frozen going to a FaZe clan. Maybe him and Twists end up playing together in FaZe clan. I also think, quite frankly, if you're Elige, you should have thought that's just Elige showing less impetus to want to move to Europe and live there. So I actually thought, quite frankly, this is also a massive move because you keep Naf in your team and you give him a true team that can be number one, something he hasn't had for a few years now. So I think that's really cool for the history of Liquid. Let's be real. Right now, Naf is the face of Liquid, right? True, Twists can be as he's returning, but Naf's the only mainstay for all these years since 2018 at this point in time. Like, you look at the others, like, Elige's gone, boys. He just has. Like, that's a travesty. You look at what he's doing in CS2 now, but okay, you chose to move on. You let this Twists go and win off in FaZe clan. Nitro is just gone at this point in time. He's quietly shifted out the back door, wasn't he? Stewie obviously had all the drama in EG, so quite frankly, Naf is Liquid, and they've been able to re-up and remix the squad to be very good around him. And by the way, he's more than good enough. He could have been in a FaZe clan winning all the tournaments right now. Like, I think he is very good at his role. I've told him this publicly and privately. I think he's basically mastered his role. I think he's got a fantastic mentality. I actually think with the balance of players in this team, it's going to work out quite well. That again, he's not going to be like a sore spot or someone adding in argument or drama or unnecessary presence in the room. He's just chilling, doing his job, winning those clutches for you, playing his lurk spots, and then doesn't even have a big ego. So I think it's a fantastic player to keep and build around. Could have been fabulous in any of those squads. I could have seen this guy, by the way. I hope he does have the offers when he gets them, because this guy couldn't he have been in any of those squads? Couldn't he have been the new player of Vitality, or him being Ents, for example, or Falcons, or FaZe? Why not? This guy could fit in almost any of these teams. Then you go and look, YEKINDAR remains, but swaps from being IGL. But great move. I told you it was a terrible move in the first place. At best, he was only ever suited as a secondary IGL, and that's because he's so aggro on entry that you want him to have some input and be given some information. But even then, I never saw him, quite frankly, as having a similar style to James. I don't get where this arrogance comes from. Is there there's these old stories, right, in Irish drinking culture that, like, if someone's leaving the pub at like the time when they kick you out at 11 back in the day, and then the idea is they meet a fairy on the way home, and the fairy takes them off into fairyland. They've had a whole lifetime, hundreds of years, and then they get transported back, but suddenly they're just on that same road on their arse on the floor, and it's only 5 minutes until they got kicked out. Like, the joke is, YEKINDAR presumably seems to think that sometime between leaving Virtus Pro / Outsiders and joining Liquid, that he had this whole career where he was like some like amazing mastermind of Counter-Strike who understood the game. I just saw a guy doing super aggro, high risk, high reward gambles on T-side, trying to just get crazy entries and sometimes doing it and having amazing games, like that Na'Vi one at the major where he runs over everyone, and having other games where he fell right into a bunch of potholes and ran into a brick wall and it didn't work. And he looked quite lost, as has happened sometimes in some major playoff games, quite frankly. So I think this is a guy where his talent is clearly there, but it isn't from his mind, is it? Like, that's the saddest thing. The real concern I have with this player is I think if you put him back in an aggressive rifle entry role, he will be really good at it. It's his attitude. It's like there's times he seems like a very passionate player and a player who does care about winning and people doing the right things. But this time, like I say, it veers into some arrogance or maybe thinking he's a star in some way. Certainly has a kind of a bit of a standoffish attitude, I'd say sometimes. Almost like finds ways to get insulted, but I don't know kind of if it's in the cool Michael Jordan, and I took that personally way. But let's see if he actually wins some trophies, right? I do think his talent is undeniable, though. So the key thing for me is if attitude is the main knock against YEKINDAR, well, one, he's not the IGL anymore, so that's not affecting other players, and two, he's got Zeus as his coach now, and I'll tell you right now, Zeus has handled Coldzera, fucking peak Elige being a bit BM, people like Naf who wanted to leave Team Liquid when Zeus was there, people like Twist who have concerns with their roles. Like, this guy's, he worked with them all, boys. He's worked with some of those names in EG that later on were getting paid megabucks and just phoning it in, and he had them winning still in Counter-Strike. Now, this is a guy who definitely knows what he's doing. He's a guy who got Phelps back to being a quality player again when everyone had written that guy off years earlier. So if anyone could do it, Zeus can. It's why I wanted this guy, Zeus, to be the coach of G2. If anyone could wrangle Nico and his ego, it's going to be Zeus. That could be an amazing pairing. So I actually think keeping YEKINDAR as long as he roll swaps back, another great move. By the way, if your first two moves are essentially just re-establishing players that have already done their job for years and they're world class in it, you can see you've actually got the good pieces to build a good squad. You can tell at the end, I'm going to say there's going to be a really good team. Then let's add in Twists, the returning player. Now, it's not as simple as just he's returning, because one, his role in FaZe, I actually think especially this year, wasn't even close to as dominant or as big as maybe the fanfare was, because like, he's the greatest NBA player of all time. He's won another Grand Slam and he's won the major. Yeah, he did, but he was like a role player in those wins. Most of the time, he wasn't a primary star of them. And so, quite frankly, the interesting thing for me is this: does coming back to Team Liquid give Twists more of a starring role, or perhaps some roles in the game he'd allowed others to have, or allowed them to overlap with him? Because if so, if this guy can go back to like the guy from the summer of 2019 or some of those amazing runs in 2018 that he had, we know he's a stud. We know he can be like a top 5, top 10 player in the world. He could be phenomenal on this team. Imagine a world where this was like Twists and YEKINDAR going super hard production-wise. Then Naf wins clutches. cadiaN's doing a good job on the op, and then Skulls does whatever at that point. Wouldn't that already be an incredibly powerful, dynamic team with like crazy firepower? By the way, isn't the lineup here crazy, the firepower? Like, I talked in the past about the old 2019 team. Look, I thought man for man, it's probably the highest skilled lineup ever to play Counter-Strike. Isn't this team right up there? Like, Twists has some of the best mechanics you've ever seen. YEKINDAR has really, really crispy fucking headshot aim. Naf just has that all-around mastery of the game. Skulls is an aggro talented player. cadiaN for an IGL is a fabulous fragger and is a good AWPer, above average tier 1 AWPer, even if he's not truly like an elite AWPer most of the time. You've got amazing skill across the board in this team. So it's a really skilled squad. That's one of the areas I don't worry so much. So then you have the idea that Twist, unlike YEKINDAR, I think doesn't have kind of an attitude, because the key thing is he's been through some hard times in past squads. In fact, I think if you saw the constant gratitude he showed to Carrigan and then people like Rain and Robban in FaZe, I think he gets it in a way young stars often don't, about the necessity of certain veterans, of having a winning environment, of having people who you can rely on, who can do their job and who can tell you what to do sometimes, even if you're a fantastic individual aim star, right? I think some of those things coming over suits him very well to work with cadiaN. You've already heard a lot of positive back and forth in interviews and videos about that, and I actually think he's going to fit into whatever system cadiaN's bringing. I think he's down for it, quite frankly. And also, he helped take Carrigan back to the top. If he does it now with cadiaN and can get cadiaN to a major and championships and a Grand Slam, well then, yeah, you know what? Even if he's not doing it all as like the #1 star rifler in the world, yeah, actually his career's becoming even more fucking epic. Like, Twist doesn't have to win another tournament ever. He's had a phenomenal career for any region, but especially a North American one. But the idea is coming back to a North American team to potentially win Czechs Notes everything, a major, Grand Slam, all the titles being number one team of the year. That's dope. Like, it actually shows also, by the way, that I do think this guy gets it in his career now. He knows, based on where his career is, what to do and where to go and when to zig and when to zag. Like, he's killing it with how he's navigating the scene. After he left Liquid and got to FaZe and then helped make FaZe, so they built up piece by piece, and then FaZe became the number one team and won everything. And then he had this period in CS2, and now he's helping make this massive, mega ambitious international super team with Zeus and with cadiaN's and stuff. Like, this guy's setting himself up to have a phenomenal career. For me, in this team, he's still best suited in the role he probably was in FaZe, which is be the third star. Have someone else, in this case, the dream would be Nath and YEKINDAR, pop off all the time, and then you just contribute. You have your games, you have your maps, you have your halves, and that'll be enough. This team's so loaded across the board. There's only skulls is the gamble that you could do it all. Now, obviously, one of the new players is cadiaN. Like, the main concern here is this: as an in-game leader, he is one of the best in the world, contender for best in the world. I'd probably still edge it to Carrigan from experience, but cadiaN, if you just put a gun in my head and say, call a random game, not a final, not a major, just a random game of Counter-Strike in 2022 or 2023, you'd be hard-pressed to find someone better than cadiaN as your choice. The problem is, he did it all in Danish, as far as we know. So now he's going to have to do it with a non-Danish team. I don't know how that's going to work out. The only great team he's ever worked with was that core of Heroic as an IGL, in terms of him being a great IGL. So will it work as well without it being in Danish? That is a concern I have. Look, cadiaN is totally fluent in English, but we're talking about even milliseconds. We're talking about losing a word or not having as precise a call. And if you think of the style he had in Heroic, here's my problem. They were a team famed for instant CT rotations when the call is made. They were a team famed for him, like, think about Mirage T-side, like mid-round, just making a call and immediately everyone maneuvers in coordination, like synchronized swimmers to the right side, off the other side, utility goes the right ways, all the smokes and the flashes come in, the entry, the site, and they're in, and suddenly they've got the bomb down. How does all that work if it's not in Danish, is my question. If it has to all be in English, if it has to all be at the same speed, does he even try that same style? There's a concern I have, right? Because I thought he was fabulous at it. That was a massive part of Heroic strength, that they all did what he said, believed what he said, trusted what he said, and did it immediately. Not just like, oh yeah, that is right, so I guess I'll do it. No, they just did it immediately. Seemingly without thinking, allowing him, therefore, to be the only one doing the thoughts in the game. That looked like it worked great. Even so, though, I imagine he also got a lot of great comms in Danish. I imagine people like Tessas were making interesting comms as they went around the corner. I imagine people like Stown as to what they wanted to do in the round, where they are, what are they watching, when are they going to come in. I imagine there was actually, like, not only a track record of knowing his teammates and his personnel, who to call from, but also I imagine they did give him useful info that he then passed and then made the great mid-round call from. Let's see how that's going to work with an international lineup. Like, I also think, quite frankly, that whole speech style that everyone was loving on camera of, like, you know, guys, like, we came from the fucking bottom together, now look where we are, like, we're going to show them all. They all say we can't win this major, but we're going to win this one, and then we're going to remember it for 20 years, man. Like, that's great in a movie. That's brilliant scene in a documentary. You'll get you hyped. It gets me hyped when I see it. The problem is, I think those speeches are so overrated in esports history. I've heard so many stories. I used to reference it with Taz back in VP. Every now and then you do one of those and they're mega. You do them every time, and eventually it's like people just tune it out, and they know it's not that mega because you've done it every single big playoff game and every single time your team was under pressure, and you know that plenty of times you didn't like show how much heart you had and live up to it, and, you know, like prove to them that they're all wrong and silence that. And sometimes you just played like normal and you lost. So I always felt his teammates in the Heroic squad, by the way, potentially got a bit more nervous. I think people like Stown actually looked a bit more scared and didn't look like they wanted, like, the fans in a hostile arena or some rival fans like inflamed before a game. Actually, some of them looked a bit scared to play. Now, I don't think like the Liquid players are scared to play the game, but I don't know that they necessarily vibe with the speeches. I think people like Twists would. I think Zeus himself would. Maybe YEKINDAR, but I get the feeling someone more like Naf's more like, let's just play the fucking game. Skulls, I mean, he's coming straight out Brazil. Who even knows where this guy's head's going to be at? So I also don't think that'll necessarily be as big a deal. By the way, I don't think it was actually as big a deal at Heroic, like, spoiler. How did it all work out with Stown and Yabby? Surely they loved cadiaN, they loved these speeches. Everyone was saying all the right things until this drama, but then suddenly you find out maybe they were sick of his shit. Maybe they didn't want to play with him. Now, look, you can decide whether that's right or wrong. We'll see. I thought those were very good players too. I'm allowed them to have their opinion. So I think people just put that part of the narrative a little bit too much. It's not WWE. That's just that's his character. He's the fucking baby face IGL who you're supposed to, like, pull for because he used to be the anti-hero, isn't he? Now, let's be real. He is a great IGL though, so I'll give him plenty of chances that he could actually have this team in a amazing positions. And this is a rare example, I've critiqued him in the past, of where I actually think his AWP is going to be really valuable. Like in Heroic, the problem was this. Some of your riflers weren't ever going to put up a 1.2 rating. When you have a team with YEKINDAR and Twists, you're going to get numbers. When you have NAF, you are going to consistently get lower, but consistent numbers and win clutch. When you have Skulls, potentially those frags on the board, I don't even think he needs to do that much with the AWP, but we know he can. We know he can be like a 0.68 KPR rifler who'll put up like a nice, efficient game. If he can call well and he can AWP like that, that is more than good enough for Team Liquid. This is a squad historically that doesn't play around dominant AWPers. The joke is the best AWPer they ever had was Simple, and he was taking the AWP from other people or just picking it because it was a big playoff game at the Major. He was supposed to be the rifler. The AWPer was supposed to be Adren, then Kooster, then JDM. So they've never actually been a squad aside from Simple and JDM. They've never even tried to make the AWP work all the time. After that, it was just Nitro for years and years and years and years, and then Aussie. Now, they never gave Aussie the time of day, and with Nitro, he just knew that wasn't even his game. The game was to AWP on the fringes of like when you need an AWP, or certain halves like a CT overpass, but then other halves not at all, and on certain T-sides never. And obviously, you're not saving the AWP in the same way as you would for a player like a Kenny S. You're just getting it occasionally, and you're not letting it destroy your economy. You're playing a low econ, Deagle style game, rushing with Tech 9s, using a low econ, allowing people with rifles to get picks. Like, I think if you add in, like, what in this squad will be a good AWP, like, this is a top 10 AWP in the world. Like, actually, can't cadiaN have mad impact, even if the IGLing ends up being different? So, to me, I think he can be Nitro 2.0, better version of what Nitro was in 2019. And Nitro was good enough to have won everything at that time. And cadiaN's still hungry. I know it feels like he's been and had this legendary career in Heroic, but he never won a major. In fact, he was just winning fucking blast tournaments. Like, this guy wants to win Katowice and Cologne and a major and a Grand Slam and have an era and be thought of as great as Glaive. And I can tell you all this. Like, this guy's not fucking around. Like, so he's got a chance now. He had, like, something of a chance in Heroic, but I thought he made a lot of that for himself. Now he just has the pieces. Now he's been given a fabulous arsenal of weapons to use, personnel, different skill sets to actually apply and potentially expand what he does as an IGL. So I think there's everything to gain in this team. I think he's far from done. I think actually he's revving to go with all this drama in Heroic, and now he has a chance to win everything. Then you've got Skulls, the brand new guy we haven't seen play much. If you saw him play in Pain, who admittedly didn't used to do much beyond RMRs than the first part of a major or the odd NA LAN, he was a clear talent. Like, him and Zevi, the AWPer, were clearly players who, like, they have their rounds where you're like, these guys are actually fucking good. Then also, he's so young in the game, he hasn't been like perverted or, I would say, influenced negatively or had a corrosive impact from the big names. He hasn't been around the Luminosity SK game players who did sort of become the equivalent of those 70s rock musicians who just live in a mansion doing drugs and have lost touch with the music scene and their fucking the bandmates in this analogy, the fans. Like, no, this is a guy who's been out there grinding. He's been in the trenches, but he clearly looks like he's got talent. The problem is, because he's inexperienced, he is very raw. He is very inexperienced. This isn't a guy who's been mixing it up in a big playoff of a major before. So it's a big, big gamble, but if you look at all the other ones, I think it's one you can afford. It's also, quite frankly, let's be real, this would have been a different name. Like, here's another one for you. What if I told you this could, and maybe even would have been Cerato? What if I told you that? Fucking hell. Cerato could be in this team. Now, tell you what, if you had that player instead of Skulls, even though the roles might need reshaping a little bit, fucking hell. I mean, I'm just saying right now, we go for the absolute top. We're like a top 3 team at a minimum. Probably win a bunch of tournaments, be in a major final or something. So, even so, this is an interesting one. I think this player has potential. Obviously, we're fast tracking him to the top. He's going to have to perform in his first year, but he doesn't have to be a big time player. He's actually he's not even required to be a star in this team, quite frankly. So, the key thing is, first of all, I think it's the easiest role to upgrade, like aggressive non-North American rifler. We have a billion of them in Russia, fucking Europe, mainland, even NA has a few of those. If you need to replace that player, easiest to replace in the game, even for cheap. And you've got Zeus, another Brazilian, to work with you. And you've got cadiaN, someone who has brought talents up who weren't as good through Heroic and made them world-class players and established them as really good at their roles. And then suddenly they look like they fit like a glove, don't they? So I think that's a massive detail. Now, Zeus himself, like Twists, is returning to Liquid. Liquid from years ago. I've always said, I think this guy's a contender for the greatest coach in the history of Counter-Strike. Think about it, right? He won the 2 majors with Luminosity and SK. By the way, almost an uncoachable team. Just ask anyone who coached them afterwards. Then he had Team Liquid in 2018, who made them like second in the world, only to Astralis. And if it wasn't for peak, Astralis would have won a bunch of those tournaments, could have won majors. Then he went back to MIBR and they had the semi-finals run at the major immediately, or maybe they were, when they were MIBR. Then he had like the fucking EG1 in the online era when they were dumpstering everyone in NA constantly over and over and over and over and over again, even though everyone was stood in all the same games. Then, even in the wilderness, he had that period who went to coach Fluxor, who almost beat Team Liquid at the last major, by the way, and he had the right in position to do so with people like Phelps, who'd been written off years ago, and you probably couldn't even name the other players in that team. Like, this guy just does work. He's got a great mind for Counter-Strike. He knows players from all across the world. He's actually very good also at working with attitudes and personalities and finding, like, the dynamic and the balance of the team and how they're going to communicate and the hierarchy and squad, as well as tactical things and boosts and map picks and knowing what to do with the opponent in the veto and all that jazz that you want to see there. I think this guy's mad under it. It's only essentially Astralis stopped this guy winning like multiple majors with multiple teams and regions. Like, what an insane fucking career he's had all in all, and a chance now, by the way, to do potentially the biggest things of his whole career. Maybe he's going to win like an Aero with this team. Maybe he's going to win a major for Liquid. Wouldn't that be cool, by the way? Twists, Nav and Zeus finally win a major under the Liquid banner. Isn't that fucking dope? So I've always thought this guy's specialty is working with big name players with potentially difficult personalities and attitudes. So I think it's perfect that he's walking in and he's going to handle YEKINDAR's the obvious one, but then you've got Skulls as the newer guy, and then you've got Twists can be a bit spicy, and cadiaN, I'm sure, has his own idea. You've got the guy who can handle all this. This is the big brother. This is the guy who's going to bring it all together. I think this is going to be a fabulous squad, even though there's plenty of question marks. It's basically question marks across the whole team, but it's only NAF doesn't have them. The only question about him is, should he have gone elsewhere? YEKINDAR, how will he do not being an in-game leader again? Can he keep his attitude under control? cadiaN, he's working with non-Danes now. He's going to have to be stylistically different in terms of how he calls. Twists, how good will he be? What role will he do in this team? What's he happy to do in this team? Will he regret leaving FaZe? Skulls is just, can he actually be a player in a true top 5 team in the world? If he can't, he's going to drag the team down. If he can, then they're going to actually win a whole bunch of trophies. And for Zeus, is he as great as I think he is? I think he is, obviously. So I'm going to say this is going to work out. I think the skill balance is excellent in this team. You've got this skilled trio of NAF, Twists and YEKINDAR if you want to model it like FaZe, but then you're going to have pop-offs from cadiaN and the odd AWP game that's big. Skulls is an aggressive player. Presumably he's going to have halves where he gets 15, 20 kills. Tactically, I think you look potentially strong. I have my reservations about the cadiaN thing and how everyone's role is going to fit, but you've got very strong pieces and quite experienced pieces to make the base of the squad with, and you've got Zeus. Personality balance seems good. You've got your more chill people like NAF, I imagine, Skulls, maybe Twists, but Twists can also be a little bit spicy in terms of what he wants from the team. cadiaN obviously has a strong voice. YEKINDAR, in theory, is the strongest voice of all, or will have a very big voice in this team. I think the potential, by the way, for real, is to be number one, is to win a major, is to win everything. Like, why couldn't this team be as good as Vitality? Now, true, they don't have a Zero. They have some great other pieces. Why couldn't they be as good as FaZe? Yeah, they don't have Karrigan, let's say. But you can argue cadiaN's almost as good. They have some other pieces that are as good as the FaZe team. I think you look at all the squads out there in the world, the Falcon squad, this team should immediately be top 5. They should actually be potentially a playoff team immediately first event. And I think, quite frankly, 2 or 3 tournaments in, they could be winning tournaments. They could be in the finals. They could be giving the best teams, Vitality, FaZe, insane matches where potentially they win and they actually just like fluke the tournament early on. Like, I think everything's available for this squad. And quite frankly, the cool thing is to big step up for Team Liquid. The saddest moment ever for me with Team Liquid, even though they had the amazing 2019, is that I always thought they had, in my opinion, one of the most obvious pivots ever at the end of 2018. Which is, at the end of 2018, you can't get over the hump against Astralis. The move you make is obvious, because that's right when you know that Karrigan's available for FaZe Clan. You sign Karrigan at that time instead of Nitro, and you just keep the rest of the stars, and then you run it back with Zeus for 2019. That's what you should have done, in my opinion. And you could have won the Grand Slam, Majors, Era. I think you could have literally done everything at that time. But they chose not to, and from then, it was diminishing returns year on year on year, and if anything, they were trading the opposite way. They were trading Twists for busted up Fallen. They were trading out some other player for fucking old ass Shocks. Eventually, bloody Nitro has to come into the line. You've got OC there. Who the fuck's Wind Waker? And suddenly you're like, Rain Waker. Suddenly you're like, how did we get from the 2019 lineup most skilled of all time, to what we've got here at the end of 2023. What the hell are we doing with this team? Now you've potentially reversed all that. And if you look at the org, by the way, they need a fucking big win. Like, League of Legends has been a bust the last few years, despite spending mega bucks trying to build big squads. Dota's basically been carrying the org, and obviously, like, you don't just win TI out of nowhere. You have to, like, you have to be one of the top teams, and then you have to get lucky, then you have to have a nice run. So they haven't done that. So this is a big deal. Like, if you look up the lineup they had last year, it was like, yeah, you could maybe make an argument like they're good. Or you think when Elise came back to a little bit of form and they had Nitro and they were making runs to semis, the odd final, it was promising, but they weren't truly world class. This team has a chance to be number one in the world. When I make content, it isn't just me, the mic, and a guest or a topic. It's also me with the support of my whole crew. Who's that, you might ask? The Skrilluminati. That's who. They include Frisky, Matt Pugnatio Rajcula, Ahmed Hadjou, Tosh, Tobias Bernasconi, Jensen Goh, Animosity, Tooorin, and you know it if you've heard it before, but if you haven't, a special thanks goes out to my main man, Jerky's Minion. Well, if you want to know upcoming topics and guests I'm going to have on my channel, maybe you want to ask me a question to answer in an AMA in video fashion. Do you want to hear one of those long discussions and actually be part of it and be able to ask me questions? Want to find out who I'm going to interview next? If any of these perks or more appeal to you, put your money where your mouth is. Join the Skrilluminati today via the Patreon link in the description box below.